Thank you, Ellen, and thank you all for inviting me here about what happened to me in my office on 9/11 and why I consider 9/11 the most blessed day of my life. Sounds odd to say that, but I think when I get done, you'll be able to understand why I say that. The people I worked with were all type A personalities. They were a great group. I've never worked with a finer bunch. That day was the end of a fiscal year for us, and we were all busy. We had seen the planes go into the World Trade Center. I worked in an office that had no windows, one door. Nobody got in our office without a clearance. As we used to say, we were cleared for ridiculous, because we saw everything. Well, on that day, it was bad. And Ellen said, hero. I have a problem with the term hero. But then again, I also have a problem with the word survivor, because that implies that you were a victim. To me, the true heroes are men and women in uniform who answered the call, went overseas, got shot at, bombed, shelled, came home, and despite everything, would go back again. Why? People go, well, they're adrenaline junkies. No, they're not. They're going back because the people that they trained with were going back. And they're going back to protect the men and women on either side of them. They're not going over mom, apple pie, and the girl next door. They're going for the people on either side of them. And those, to me, are the true heroes. Go ahead and hit. And the Pentagon. The Pentagon was actually laid in 1941, September 11th. Because of the war, they used a lot of concrete. I mean, a lot of concrete. And it was only when they went to do the renovation and had to take the building apart because it was destroyed, we found out how they built it. They used some steel, but they used it very wisely. And that is what kept the building together. That's what saved so many thousands of lives, because the building held together when nobody thought it could. The construction techniques were unheard of in today's technology. Meanwhile, we had Flight 77 flying around. It was taking over southern Ohio, came back, lined up on Washington, and then they did a circle, a right-hand turn circle, and lined up on the Pentagon. The pilot had actually been trained in an American flight school. He got the plane, gunned it, and crashed into the building doing 530 miles an hour with 16,000 pounds of jet fuel on board. For those in the military, there's a term called a fuel-air explosion. Well, we had a fuel-air explosion inside a building. It took 0.8 of a second for that building to go to the outer wall to breach the inner wall of the C-ring. 0.8 of a second, that's a reaction time. Let's see. Next thing is, as you can see, the plane came in so low. It's already ahead of me. It came in so low that it clipped light towers. I know people I have a friend who's actually in the parking lot, and you could see the very edge of it there. She was on her way to our office. She heard the noise, looked up, and said, that plane's awfully low. I don't think he's going to make it. And boom, she watched it go in. She was so close, she could feel the heat of the blast on her face. And she stood there like a deer in the headlights until somebody said, run, we're under attack. How did it feel like to be on the inside? I, in one way, was very fortunate. I was not at my desk. They think one of the wheel gears went right through my desk. I was at another place. I was in a cubicle, I had just laid a piece of paper down, stood up, and was to walk away, and I realized that she and I were the only ones in the entire office that were allowed to see that document. So I picked it up again, and just as I stood up, I heard a noise. The thought immediately went through my head, do I tighten or do I loosen? Because something's coming and it's not good. Next thing I know, blast of air. Think of going home tonight, get your oven, crank it all the way up, and wait a half hour and stick your hand inside. That's what it felt like. The heat was intense. I am not a small guy. I got picked up and thrown about 15 feet, just off of air. I get asked, did you pass out? I have yet to understand how you know if you passed out if you passed out. The last thought as I was flying through the air to go through my mind was, well, this is it. I thought I was a dead man. My next thought, as I came to on the ground kneeling, covered in debris, I looked up and said thank you, because I should be dead. I looked down at my hands. It looked like somebody had gotten a vegetable scraper and just peeled the skin off my hands, my fingertips. And then I heard screaming. One of the ladies I worked with was on fire. Ceiling tile had landed on her, and she kept hitting it with her forearm. And it had, the ceiling tile grids had kept it together like a little hat. So she hit it, it rocked back, she'd bring her arm down, it'd come back again. I crawled over, and I went to grab the ceiling tile, and years of training with the Navy taught me one thing. You need your hands to get out. So instead of grabbing the tile, I just hit it with the back of my hand and knocked it off of her. Got our group together, and then I blame my Navy training again for this. As the governor said, I went the wrong direction. I went to the back of the room. I went to the rest of my staff was. I crawled back, got to a point where anything that was supposed to be straight wasn't. If it was vertical, it was like this. It was horizontal, it was like that. And the fire was so intense, I go, nobody's coming out of there. Came back, got up a ton of desks trying to find a way out because he had told me the way was blocked. And I saw hell. I saw fires everywhere, just burning like mad. And to me, that was my vision of hell. I got back to our group, and one of my guys looked at me and said, this is bad. We got to get out of here. I said, you know, you're right. And I started looking for the door. Because, again, because of the Navy training, I always knew where I was in the room. I knew because I knew where everything was. I knew where the doors were. I knew where the emergency lights were. Because I've been in engineering, and the first thing they teach you is you better figure out how to get out of here if things go bad. I crawled, tried crawling across. They said I kicked down a partition, or tried to. I don't remember. I know knocking one over. I came up to what was the front of our office, and I saw a little tunnel. And I went, this is not a good time to get stuck. So I got up on my knees, looked across, and saw a way across the desk. And I was totally spread across this desk, going, now how am I going to get down? So as I came down face first, I lost my shoe. And all I could think of was Bruce Willis in one of those movies where he loses his shoe and there's going to be broken glass everywhere. I'm going, oh great, this is going to get worse. So I crawled down under the ground, and I could see where our front door was. Our front door wasn't there anymore. We had a solid steel door with a combination lock. They found it 200 feet down the hallway. Just gotten blown off. Let's see, there you go. Go back one. You see that little dot? That's me. You see a hole And then you see a little thing called a flight data recorder. I was about 20, 25 feet away from the flight data recorders. Actually, so it was really simple in our office. If you're on one side of the line, you lived. If you were on the other side, you died. I, unfortunately, was on the line. And I lived. That's our back wall. There's a wheel gear in there, pretty hard to make out. But see all that paper? We were moving on Friday. We were all boxed up to leave. I hate to think of the classification levels on those papers out there. Because it was... So we get out and get to the center courtyard. All the medical people came out of their admin jobs, went to the center courtyard to help us. Nobody asked them to. Somebody broke into a supply of water bottles, and we were handed water bottles in the center courtyard. And that's when I heard, another plane is coming. Now, I wasn't as good a student as Alan, but I know if another plane is coming, that means the first one was a plane, because we had no idea what had happened. We had the Navy Command Center on one wall, we had the Air Force Computer Center on the other, and in the Pentagon, you learn not to ask questions what's in certain rooms. So I thought maybe we got bombed. We didn't know. But they evacuated us out. They put me in an ambulance to Walter Reed. And just go right to the Walter Reed one. Oh, that's it. Okay, back on one. The two women, that one, that shows something a little weird. Our roof caught on fire. People go, how could your roof catch on fire? World War II, they needed insulation. Guess what they used? Horsehair. Horsehair just started burning, and it kept going under the tiles. And they had a hard time trying to keep ahead of it. So they burned off our roof. Then I get to Walter Reed, where I got the best medical care in the world. I get there, the ambulance comes to a halt. I had already thrown up into, God, I had so much stuff inside me. And I hear, he's first. Somebody grabs my pant leg, and I don't know what they used, but I lost my pants in about half a second. They just cut them right off me. Next thing I know, I hear my wife's voice. And she had said, when she got there, she was going to say something to make me laugh, make me happier, because she knew things were bad. And she goes, this is what you do to get me to drive in the district. She had actually come in the back door, and all the doctors and the head staff were at the front door waiting for her. Well, she's stuck in the back. She gets to my bed. I'm laying there, one eye open, one eye closed, which for a neurologist means you just killed half a brain. She looks at me and goes, Paul, open your other eye. My eyeball opens, and neurologists are going, ask patient, open other eye. There you could see I'm on life support. Back then, I never knew what a ventilator was. I was on life support for 6 days. My eyes were like that Star Wars movie, the guy's all red, it's all red. That's what my eyes look like. Apparently the pressure, peakial hemorrhage. I had burned my lungs so badly that they were pulling dead skin out of my mouth. They had a trach in me, and they were vacuuming out my lungs. They had to explain to my wife what they were pulling out was the lining of my lungs, because much like a woman who has a period, the linings of my lungs had burned off and just sloughed out to the bottom of my lungs. So they're able to, fortunately they had these little pipette things, and it sucked all that right out of me. That's the First Lady. She was actually in the Capitol when 9/11 happened. She was in a meeting with Senator Kennedy. And the next day, she goes to visit the people that were hurt. This is a lady who was in a place that was a target, or the house she lived in was the other target, and yet she went to go see all of the people that got hurt. I have to admire that. My poor wife, which is right behind her, She had to call our children and tell them to come home. Walter Reed had tried very carefully to tell her I wasn't going to make it. On Thursday morning, the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of the Army were briefed that I was going to die that day. They didn't tell me. I say it's an advantage of missing a staff meeting. So they finally get me off life support, and I look at them and I go, can I stand up? You want to talk about a bunch of scared nurses all at once? You want to do what? Walter Reed did something for me that I think was the smartest thing. They took me down to their nursery and see the brand new babies. New life. They got me fixed up. After 2 weeks, they sent me home. I got out of Walter Reed almost 2 weeks to the minute that I got there. And I think it was much harder on my wife than it ever was on me. I slept through most of it. I was on the fentanyl, I was on all the good drugs. You could have hit me with a baseball bat, I wouldn't have known it. But my wife said that even they would load me up full of morphine, and I'm in a medically induced coma. When they would start treating the burns, I would start tearing. I never did that while I was awake, but only while I was unconscious. Well, what did we learn? I think let's go to resilience, the next one. The American people had a choice. They could crawl under their beds and hide, or they could fight back. They hung a flag from the Pentagon. The people I worked with would get out of the hospital and go to work the next day. Where do you find people like that? It's an indomitable American spirit, Lieutenant Governor pointed out. Go to the next one. We're running out of time here on you. Recovery. You see the hole in the building? I have friends that were in that office. A lady was giving a brief, and she got blown out of her heels. But she had time because that building held together to get out of there. Only 125 people in the building died. Most of them on the first floor, some on the second, only a couple on the third. That meant that building held together long enough for everybody to get out of there, which we owed back to the architects back in 1941. So the E-ring collapses. In Arlington Cemetery is a monument. It lists everybody that was killed that day. It's in alphabetical order, regardless of rank, position. There's a lieutenant general who's right next to somebody else, just alphabetical order. Inside, it was originally designed to hold in honor of the people they couldn't find parts for. And then every so often, when they have found more parts, they have stuck them in. Two of the ladies I worked with, the biggest piece they found of her was her jawbone, and it was next to the flight data recorder. But the only comfort I've ever had is they were dead before I hit the ground. When they asked me, did they suffer, I said no. Because when I was flying through the air, the body has a way of protecting itself from that much trauma. And I didn't feel the pain. It's one of them, one of our friends, Bob Himmel. If you ever go there, you can look at the bottom of his tombstone, and there's little stickers that his grandchildren have put on there to honor their grandfather. Well, that led us to what's called the Phoenix Project, which was next. They had to take the building apart, put it back together again. What most people don't know is a lot of the construction workers came from New York because they couldn't do anything up in New York They wanted to do something. So they came down to Washington and started working on the building. They had to make the guys go home. Guys wouldn't stop working. That building, which they thought would take months to take apart and put back together, people were moving in 1 year later. And they put in all the new lessons learned from the attack. There's the old, actually the next one will be the old, and now the new. I actually have a piece of that limestone. It was given to me as a, I don't know what you call it. Go to the next one, please. Behind all the numbers and the speeches, they're real people. These are the people I worked with. Oh, that was the memorial. These are the people I worked with. 3 of them I was the direct supervisor for. 20 years in the military never taught me to lose 2 young mothers. And that's what I lost. We all lost. However, one of the girls, her mother died. She's now first year law school, University of Wisconsin. We keep in touch with the families, and we find out they all went on. One thing that we did find out was the men folded. I'm sorry, guys, we folded like an accordion. Military wives did great. They did very well. They were much tougher than the men. We lost 7 that day, but the number's not really that. One lady, Sandra, her husband died a year later, basically of a broken hearted. He went to bed one night, woke up, never woke up. So the personnel said something to me. They were afraid to tell me, and they said he died. They go, we can't figure it out. What is it? Well, he died in October. I go, because that's when we buried her. He died a year after his wife, they buried his wife. He was so brokenhearted. I wanted to say, I said, why is it my most blessed day? Sound like I got kind of messed up that day. Well, 20 years later, I've had 5 surgeries. 3 on my neck, 1 on my back, and 1 because I happened to crush my ureter. From hitting what? I don't know. The doctors go, what did you hit? I was unconscious, flying through the air. How am I supposed to know? So they went and fixed it. But to this day, I carry a tube with me, and in there is Benadryl in case my throat starts to swell up. It has Valium, not for the reason you would think. It's because of vertigo. I used to get vertigo. Half the room would spin, and the other half would stay right where it was. I learned to control it after a while. I've had retired in November of 2004 because my doctors said you either go home or you're going to be dead in 10 years. You won't make it. And when you got 2 very outstanding doctors telling you that, you pay attention. So I asked for, and they gave me a medical retirement. And in January 2005, I walked into a gym and interviewed a bunch of trainers, and I found one that was also a physician's assistant and said, fix me. Tell me what's broken and what can I do to get better. I have either been in rehab therapy, surgery, or seeing those trainers to put me back together. You saw me have a problem walking. If you go to a doctor, I exhibit all the symptoms of MS. I don't have MS. I exhibit the symptoms of diabetic neuropathy. Not diabetic, not even close. I've lost the hearing in my right ear. My neuro-ontologist is no longer functional. I have no balance. All my balance is eyesight-based. You put me in a dark room, I will fall over. Can't control it. That's just the way it is. People go, are you reminded of 9/11? I'm reminded of 11 every single day because when I look down at my hands when I'm watching them, I could see the atrophy in my hands. Like a stroke or a palsy victim, is because of those trainers working me and keeping me going. I've had doctors look at me and go, "How are you alive?" I'm alive because God decided I could live. And I truly believe that. But then it was, how do you explain how the other people died? Good people. I miss my friends. I think of them a lot. If I go to Washington, I'll go to the monument, the memorial, and I'll sit on their bench and I'll talk to them. Do the same when I go to Arlington. But it's still my most blessed day because I shouldn't be here. I should have never survived the blast. I never should have gotten out of that room. And I never should have, but I did. Is it because, my wife says it's because I'm a little stubborn. I'm not sure. But because I think I got some of the best care. I had an ICU nurse staring at me for 22 hours a day. They would sit there and just look at me. My wife likes to remind me that she knew how to turn off all the alarms, and she knew where the plugs were. I go, "Thank you, honey." But I can't imagine going to see you get to live. On Thursday morning, General Shinseki, Chief of Staff of the Army, came to the hospital. He came to my room, and my wife stood at the door and wouldn't let him in because I had been put into a medical coma because they didn't want me fighting the machines. I was that critical. They had done an override giving me more oxygen than they're normally allowed. It was really, he's going to die. We have no choice. And she won't let him in. You want to talk about an Army staff getting a little antsy. He's in charge of the whole Army, and she's not letting him in. So he came back on Sunday, brought his wife, his backup, and he looked at her and said, "Ma'am, I wish my soldiers stood guard as well as you do." So, as I think the governor put it very well, we as an American people, California, that were in their bedrooms hiding under their bed. They were afraid to come out. But we said, no, we're going to go and do it. What I went through, though, again, I was in a burning room for 20 minutes. After that, it's all recovery. The men and women in uniform who went over, came back, and they went over again. I don't know what to call that. It's either, and they're the ones that are true heroes. Thank you all.